So we talked about last week and how this verse where the love of money and the coveting after, which is the interesting part, where it causes people in decision making and in the choices in their lives to make errors, right? And then those errors cause further problems and the piercing themselves through with many sorrows, right? And we look through Genesis chapter 28, 29, which is where we're going to go back to as we continue through Genesis, and Jacob and Esau and Leah and Rachel and Laban, he's all involved in there, right? And the decisions that were made, you could see how the 1 Timothy verse is, the tinge of that is in this story and in the dealings with Laban and Jacob and Isaac and Esau and that whole relationship, and how this verse there is kind of intertwined in the errors that are made and the many sorrows that come from these things are evident, right? And we're going to pick up there then in Genesis chapter 29, verse 31, where it says, "And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren." Okay, so that's where we're kind of picking up from last week after we've got the whole marriage with Leah and then Jacob being deceived, and now Rachel comes in a week later, and he's serving another 7 years for her. And we come in then into Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 through 5. "And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead? Who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her, and Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son." All right, so what's interesting in these verses is we've seen this scenario before, have we not? Right? We've had this scenario with Abraham and Sarah. We've had it with Isaac and Rebekah, and now we have it with Jacob and Rachel. Right? And the scenario being barrenness and how that's being handled. Barren. Right? And how did Abraham and Sarah handle the whole barrenness situation? Nobody remembers? We got to go back that far now? Tony? Huh? Hagar, right? Okay, so we dump Hagar in there. But how did they personally handle it? Say it again? Poorly. What specifically did they do? Well, they helped God, sure, but how did... Well, let's go back then to Jacob and Rachel. As we see in verses 1 and 2, what happened? We just read it, nobody knows. What happened? What did Rachel do? Right? Rachel goes to Jacob, Give me children or else I die. Right? And then what's his response? Yeah, Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, right? So here we have a nice little argument going on, right? Give me, and I'm not God. Right? So you got this nice little argument going on. But then what happens? What is their resolution to this? How? How did Jacob give in to Rachel's request? Did Rachel have children? No. So what happened? Right, we got Bilhah going on, right? This is kind of like the whole Hagar situation again, right? But how did we see? So now we see the picture of how Jacob and Rachel handled this situation. But how did Abraham and Sarah handle it? Do you see an argument between Abraham and Sarah? No. Okay? So let's take a look then at what Isaac and Rebekah did. How did Isaac and Rebekah handle the situation? Do we remember a couple weeks ago? Because did they not also realize that they were barren? Huh? They prayed. Remember, what did Isaac do? Say it again. Right? He entreated the Lord. Right? Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife's sake. And then what happened? We don't remember the story of Isaac. Wow, guys, really? I expect this out of teen class. Right? Pregnant with twins. Good job. Somebody knows an answer. Twins. And then she's like, oh, wait a minute. Why am I thus? And then what does she do? She also prays. Okay. So then go back to Abraham and Sarah. What do we see happening? We know that they thought about it, right? Because when Abraham is talking with God and God is giving Abraham the promise, Abraham's like, wait a minute, I don't have an heir. The heir of my house is this Eliezer from Damascus. So how's this working, God? Right? So Abraham asked God, do we see any argument? Do we see any, we do see a mistake though, right? Where after time they decide to go and try and circumvent things and get the answers the way, well, we're going to have to figure this out on our own. Because clearly God's not doing anything, right? So we see an interesting difference in the way that this whole barrenness situation is handled between the three families, right? What's interesting then too is how do you think Leah fits in here? How do you think Leah fits into that? Or does she? Randy. Leah is technically the first wife of Jacob. Even though it was supposed to be Rachel, but he got tricked by Laban. So how does that contribute to this? So do you think she's egging this on at all? Because she's got children, right? Do you think she's helping this on? Sort of like Samuel, Hannah, and Peninnah, right? That little vexation going on there. Oh, I got kids, what's your problem? Right? Helping that along at all. So, does the Bible condone multiple wives? Does the Bible condone sister wives? No, right? But it does tell us. And it gives us the reality of what's going on, right? Right? It gives us a reality of what goes on when you're having multiple wives. Why do you think then when you get to the Kings, where God tells the kings, look, you're not supposed to multiply to yourselves wives? Because what's the problem that happens? Right? They draw you away from the Lord. And then there's conflict within the house. Right? Jealousy. You got conflict. Right? Because now the more people you get, the more opinions you get. Right, Randy? Very good. What do you got?
Just like with Jacob and Esau, conflict.
Yeah. That's very good. We've got conflict with Jacob and Esau, and we've got conflict with Rachel and Leah, and then you get these families all together, and it's a little bit volatile, right? Genesis chapter 30, verse 8. How does it describe the relationship between Rachel and Leah? Right? They're wrestling. What does that mean to you, Bob? Conflict, wrestling. But what does Rachel ultimately say there? I have prevailed. Yeah, it is. It's a contest. It's a battle. It's a fight. I mean, it's not like a little, I don't know, how do you go, little sibling rivalry? Rivalries are big. Right? Rivalries, that's the whole point behind the rivalries. They hate each other, right? You got to go back, Packers-Bears in the 80s. I mean, that's a rivalry where they hate each other, right? That's what's going on there. But then there's negative consequences to that. We also see Genesis chapter 30, verses 14 through 16. Here we have, and Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. Right? Now, how big of a deal is that? Kid finds some fruit, brings it to mom, sister goes to other sister, hey, can I have some of that fruit? Right? Is that in and of itself a big deal? No, it shouldn't be, right? Somebody found something, we share, we're a family, we all love each other, right? But remember what we've got going on here with this jealousy and this conflict going on, and what is then the reaction? In 15, and she said unto her, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him, and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. Right? And there's laughing going on because, wow, what kind of transaction was this? Right? Sister goes, hey, can I have some of that fruit? Other sister goes, you stole my husband and now you want my fruit too? Wow, that escalated quickly, right? And then the other sister goes, fine, I'll take some of the mandrakes. You can have Jacob tonight. Okay, fine. And then she starts to come in from the field. Boom, she's out the door. You're with me tonight because I bought you with some mandrakes. He's probably like, what happened here today? So there's a whole interesting back conflict, bitterness thing going on here. But then where does it come from? Where is it coming from, Randy? The apple, okay. I'm assuming you're going back to Adam and Eve and that's in there. Okay, so where does this conflict come from? Of what? Sure, disobedience, but what? Think about the verse that we're talking about that is tinging this whole story. Because what did she just do? What did Leah just do? What did Rachel just do? Yeah, he's a bargaining chip. There's bartering going on. There's a transaction being made. Why is that happening? Well, there's the competition that's going on. But what else? Why is this happening? Where did this attitude mindset come from? Randy.
Notice there's a lot of conflict, treachery throughout the Bible and throughout our life, and I'm just waiting.
Sure, we've got Jacob and his treachery, right? But what do we have going on the girl's side? Who's their example? Well, the husband is the example. Who else before that? Laban is. And what did we know about Laban? He's tricky in his own right, isn't he? Right? Genesis 31, verses 14 and 15. Now, this is at the end where Jacob calls Rachel and Leah out to the field after, Laban's countenance toward Jacob has changed, and they're looking to get out of Dodge. And in 14 and 15, and Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him being Jacob, Is there any yet portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. Right? And it goes on to talk about the riches that they had. Right? So how do they consider themselves, or what do they consider themselves? Property. Okay, so then how does that translate then into how they are then treating A, each other, but then B, Jacob in this situation with the mandrakes? As property. It's all property and transaction stuff going on here. Now that's how you do a Sunday school lesson. You're going to go shoo down the side, right? It's all property and transaction stuff going on here. So what's interesting then is then that the example that parents put forward, kids carry over, right? Good or bad. What's also interesting is we like to look at the Bible, and especially in the role of women, and see that, well, it looks like they're treated like property a lot, right? Or a commodity or whatever in the culture. What does this tell us? It goes both ways. It's across the board. That's the way people work, right? Okay? So there's a lot that's going on there. And in Genesis chapter 31, verse 7, this is Jacob talking about Laban to Rachel and Leah. And your father hath deceived me. So we've already talked about Laban's own treachery. And, verse 7, and changed my wages 10 times. And God suffered him not to hurt me. Why would Laban change his wages 10 times? What's the point? What's Laban trying to do? He's trying to benefit himself, right? He's trying to grow his own wealth. Okay? So, again, Laban is making these decisions. He's affecting daughters. He's affecting son-in-law in a positive way or a negative way? Negative way, right? Jacob's making these decisions. Leah and Rachel are making these decisions. Is that affecting the family in a positive way or a negative way? Randy? Sure, right? It's always going to be a negative or an error. Okay, so, and then even going back to Rebekah and the treachery that starts there. How does that affect the relationship with Isaac? How does that affect the relationship with Jacob and Esau? And then Jacob and Esau together, right? So we can kind of see. Peter, you had your hand?
This is the flesh in action, if you will. God's not really in the picture here at all. They're making fleshly decisions. It's all about self and what I'm getting out of it.
Sure.
And the flesh brings corruption.
Right? Of the flesh, right? The flesh brings corruption. Okay. Very good. Okay, so we can continue to see how 1 Timothy 6:10 is proven generations apart, right? And then these examples are written for us. Why? Do we, Mark? Do we learn, Mark?
Some people do learn faster than other people.
Faster than others, right? It's like we give it a try and go, you know what? The Bible was right. Why did I do that? Right? Why do we do this the hard way? All right, very good. And then we pick up interesting sidetrack, right? So when Jacob and Rachel and Leah and the whole family there get up out of Dodge and leave Laban behind, how old are the kids? How old do you picture that in your head? Other than Darlene, because Darlene always messes up my stuff. How old are the kids? Shirley, how old are the kids? Teens? Okay. Sandy, what do you think? You think teens? That's the way you picture the story in your head? Dennis, what do you think? Is that a question or a statement? Okay, very good. Way to do the math there. He's got to be under 20. Okay. Peter. Right, very good. Okay. So out of 7, right, and they left at 20, so there's no kids in that first 7 years. That's when they got married to Leah, and then you got the 1 week, and then you get Rachel. And then they served another 7 years, okay, for Rachel. And then plus 6 for the sheep. What's interesting, though, is that Joseph, I'll say most of the kids, because Benjamin's not there, but all the kids we know about at this time are born in this 7-year period. That's a lot of kids to be having in a short period of time, right? So the oldest at the time that they left is only going to be about 13, if he was right away, you know. So you're looking at that 11, 12, 13 range, and they're just pounding out these kids all over the place. That's a lot of little multiplying quickly there, Randy.
I think it's a statement of faith and love. All the kids, because you have faith in the future.
Okay, you could think that, sure, about how he has faith in the future, right? All right, very good. All right, that's fine. Where are we going? Genesis chapter 30, verse 43. Genesis 30, verse 43. And this is talking about Jacob at the end of the sheep, and how the man, Jacob, increased exceedingly and had much cattle, maidservants and menservants, and camels and asses. Again, the interesting focus all the way through Isaac, through Jacob, through Laban, and all this is the stuff that they have, right? Even going back to Abraham, when the servant goes to Laban to find Rebekah in the first place, his credentials that he lays out are not how godly Abraham is. His credentials that he lays out are, my master is rich, and his son is getting all of it, right? And that tone carries on throughout even to this point, where it says that Jacob's increase. The focus on 1 Timothy 6:10 there. Genesis 31 then, as we carry into 1 and 2, and he, Jacob, heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which our father hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So we have the countenance of Laban changing. Why did his countenance change? Some of his stuff was gone, right? But how was it gone? How was it gone, Randy?
Probably material, so I wouldn't care too much about it.
Okay, Chuck?
Jacob's increase was blessed and Laban's was not.
How is it perceived?
Well,
I mean, you're right. Jacob was blessed.
Laban's perspective, this is where he lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is his father's place, right?
Yep. The heritage that's
They
there.
have the wealth, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden, this upstart shirt-tail relative shows up,
Yeah.
and his sheep produce more sheep than mine do.
Okay.
So it was a jealousy thing.
Okay.
Not unlike Cain being jealous of Abel's relationship with God.
Sure. So Laban is jealous, right? That A, Jacob was blessed, and B, Laban was not. But how is it perceived, Valerie?
From my perception, Jacob's increases are from treachery, not from anything else. He purposely let the strong cattle breed with his and made the weak ones go with Laban's. He was purposely making his father-in-law's herds weaker and
He was-
his stronger.
Okay.
So I think that as Laban too.
Okay, so Jacob and the whole sheep thing where is also done by treachery is what Valerie is saying. Because he purposely had the stronger of the sheep multiply with his and the weaker with Laban's. Who's in control of that? God is, though, right? Who changed the wages? Laban did. So if all of one kind of cattle produce through treachery, right, a certain kind, and then Laban switches it and says, no, those are mine, you get these, but then these start producing the stronger kind, who's in charge of that? God is. So yes, initially, there is treachery going on. There is deception that's going on. But who is doing the blessing? Why is God blessing? Why would God bless treachery? Randy.
You don't know the answer to, or do you know the answer to that?
Peter.
Because of his own word, he said he would bless Jacob's meddling, and he probably just overruled, if you will. Not necessarily that he cared for it, but
What's the promise? What's the promise that God gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? I will bless and multiply thee. How does it happen? Is there treachery on both sides? Right? There's treachery all over the place. Right? But yet, what does that tell us about how God can work in our lives, even though we're idiots? He can still bless us. Why? What is his plan? Why is Jacob blessed?
I don't know the verse right off the top, man. It's got to be in these chapters somewhere, but basically, God sees the treachery of Laban, and that's why and another reason why he blesses Jacob. He intervened. I think the treachery of Laban was greater.
Sure. But then you got to go back to the promise. Dexter. Right. His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob now has that. So when somebody is cursing Jacob, even though Jacob himself is not being forthright, like Peter said, the treachery that's on Laban's side is perceived as worse because it's against God's promised person there. Right? Even though Jacob himself is not, holy and righteous there. Right? So the whole reason why it looks, even though there's treachery involved on both sides, it's the promise the promise of God that it goes back to Peter.
The key in this too, even looking at our own lives, God sees the finished product. Later on, when Balaam is called to curse them, he says, I see no iniquity in Jacob. He say, what?
Yeah.
He's been nothing but crooked and treacherous, but God sees him at the end where we're perfected in Christ. So it's the same thing with us.
Yeah.
We are perfect in Christ.
Yeah. Right. What does God see because of Christ? Because of Christ in us and Christ's blood covering our sins. What does God see when he looks at us? Even though we act dumb, right? God goes, no, he's mine, and why are you cursing mine? So you're cursed, and I'm going to bless him, right? And that's what's going on there. But it's interesting how that the sons and even Laban perceive it then as being taken away. This was mine, and now it's over there. How did it get there? He took it, right? Not that we lost it, right? Not that we didn't take care of our own stuff and now it's gone over there. He took it. Not that God blessed Jacob and didn't bless us. He took it, right? How do we still see that today? Randy? Personal positions and not God's. Okay. How do we still see that today? Do we still see it today? Mumble. Yeah, huh? What? Do we still see it today? Do we still have, are there people who have the attitude of, it's not my fault, I don't have anything, they took it? Right? Okay. So now let's go back. 1 Timothy 6:10 says what? Right? And even there, it continues to tinge our whole story, even through 1 Timothy into today, because this stuff still happens. All right? Let's see. Genesis 31, verse 3. This is where we have God telling Jacob, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Guess what, Jacob? It's time to get up out of Dodge. You don't belong here anymore. Right? Because where does Jacob actually belong? Canaan. And that's the difference that we talked about last week before, whatever it was, where Abraham did not send Isaac to the foreign land to go get a wife. Jacob was only supposed to be gone how long? A few days. Right? And how long did that turn into? 20 years. Right? So time to go back to where you belong. Genesis 31, 14, 15, we already talked about that, where the daughters perceive themselves as being sold by Laban, and that he has devoured our money. And in verse 19, and Laban went to shear a sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Right? So here's an interesting thing here. Rachel stole the images. Why? Why did Rachel steal her father's images? What thinkest thou? You doubt that, okay. It's funny because that is one train of thought behind why she took them, was to keep her father from idolatry. Really? Okay. Not likely. Darlene. Why would you think that she still had her feet in her father's world as well as her own world? It's been 13 years. You are affected by your parents, aren't you? And go ahead, Shirley. It was hers anyway. What does that mean? I'm going to take it as a souvenir of my dad, or like, what are you thinking? Or he owes me because he took all my money, so I'm going to take his stuff. So I took these. Why would you take his images then? Why don't you take something, well, maybe they were valuable. I don't know what they were made out of. It doesn't say. Randy.
We're guessing, right? I can guess. My guess is there wasn't some twisted thought of some sort.
It wasn't some twisted thought of some sort. That's what you're saying? Okay. Well, so then it was an innocent mistake that she packed it up? Well, it says she stole. Okay. Peter?
Well, I would have guessed those are the guys she was raised with. So now her husband has Jehovah. But, why not bring other guys along too who are taking a long journey for protection?
Okay. So there's the whole, well, Laban, when we see him with camel guy, the servant, right? And he tells his story of the Lord and, well, can I have her? And with Rebekah. And Laban and Bethuel go, well, it's of the Lord. What are we going to do? Right? So they even have a mix. Right? So there's a mix of idolatry and God. Right? Which is an interesting foreshadowing of Israel as a country. Right? Because what do we see all through Judges and Kings and Chronicles? Peter.
So many people, that's just
Oh, yeah.
that's just people in general. They need something they can see with their eyes to represent God.
Yeah.
We walk in the flesh.
We-
Very fleshy religion. So when he came along and basically said, don't make any images in the Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
I'm sure that blew a lot of them away because that was basically how they handled it.
Yeah. The being able to see stuff is funny. They just had in the news where a river, I should have printed it out, but I didn't. But they just had a river that, due to drought, has lowered, and you can see like half of this Buddha statue now show up, where it used to be a temple, but then it flooded, and now everybody got out of Dodge but left their God there, and now you can start to see part of him again. So what does that tell you, though, about our images and our idols that we see, or when it floods and you see Buddha floating down a river and going, there's my God, right? What does that tell you about your God? Pretty lame, right? I mean, he can't even save himself, and you're calling on him to save you? Really? Interesting. Okay. What else do we got? Verse 33, Genesis 31, verse 33. Genesis 31, verse 33. This is after Laban then tracks Jacob down, and he's searching through their stuff in 33. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tent, but he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. What's interesting there? Valerie.
We tell our children if you have to hide something, you know it's wrong. So if we catch them doing something, we're like, did you hide it? They'll be like, oh, no, I didn't know it was wrong. Did you hide it? Then you knew it was wrong.
Okay.
So she knows. She knows it's wrong. She wouldn't have had to hide it, and she picked a really good spot to hide it.
Yeah, right? So what Valerie's saying is that she knew it was wrong because she hid it. We always, just like Adam and Eve, as soon as they did what was wrong, boom, they're off hiding, right? What do you find interesting about the order? Wife. He picked her last. Why did he pick her last? He was hoping it wasn't her? Question mark? Thought maybe she was innocent. His sweet baby girl. Where did he go first? No, try again. Jacob. Right? Yoli knows. Yoli's a parent. So you always go to that first suspect, right? The most likely suspect, you tag them first. Tony's getting out. Right? Well, at least you always get blamed for it, right? But it's interesting. He goes there first. Why does he go to Jacob first? What had Jacob done to him that would cause him to think that it was him? Randy. Does Laban know that? Dexter. There's no way it's my kids. That's an interesting mentality that parents have, right? There's no way it's my kids, right? You get the call at work from your principal at the school. No way it was my kid. My kid didn't do it. My kid's an angel, right? Dexter? Sure, right? That is an interesting mentality that people have, because you could see the order. He went from Jacob first, then he went to the servants, then he went to Leah, and then after that, then he left Leah's tent and went into Rachel's tent, thinking his kids are innocent. And then Rachel's got to be the favorite, right? So as we get into next week, as we look into Joseph, favoritism, right? Favoritism shows up. And the effects then on the jealousy, the conflict, the bitterness there when parents show favoritism and the results that can have. So that's interesting. Sandy. What's happening?
A lot of times when people do things to other people, they know that person that they've done something to may come back on them.
Okay.
And so he's starting with the people he's done things to in his lifetime and thinking that they would do something to get even with him.
Sure. That kind of goes along with what Dexter was saying. Yeah, because I did that, if I was them, I would do this to me. Right? Yep, very good. What I like is in 52, Genesis chapter 31, verses 52. I call it the wisdom of the heap. Right? And you see these two, that this heap, they set up this big heap of stones between them to be a witness, and this pillar be a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. There are times when dealing with people or relationships or whatever where you need a heap, and it's like, look, we do not belong together. There's nothing good is going to come from this. Look, you go over there, and I'll go over here, and never the twain shall meet, There's ties spiritually that way, right? Because we're supposed to be ye separate, right? Not being unequally yoked, okay? We'll see that probably next week. But just for, what is the saying, where good fences make good neighbors or something like that? Tall fences make good neighbors? I don't know. I don't remember what it is. Say it again? Okay. Well, there you go. So, I mean, there is truth to that sometimes where, okay, our best option instead of constantly fighting is do you be over there and I'll be over there in this corner, right? And to leave it there. The wisdom of the heap. What else do we got? What else is Genesis 32 then? We have Jacob sending messengers to Esau. In Genesis 32, verses 3 through 6. He sends messengers to Esau. Why? Why is he sending messengers to Esau? Randy. Sure, except the one wants to kill him. Or at least that's the last he knew, right, Darlene?
Other for the fact that he's coming back.
I'm going to be in the area, just in case. And then how does Esau respond in verse 6? Genesis 32, verse 6. How does Esau respond? 400 people. Yeah, no kidding. Right? But what's the problem? What's the problem in verse 7? You got a 400-person welcome committee coming, but what don't you know? If they're friendly or not. There were no intentions given. All you know is this horde is coming. Great. But what do you see then Jacob do in 9 through 12? No, not yet. Not yet. That's his chicken move later. What's he doing in 9 through 12? Reminding God, right? This is the time you actually see Jacob praying. And like Peter said, he's reminding God, he's like, okay, wait a minute. There's 400 people coming. You're the one who told me to go. I'm going. I'm doing what you told me to do. In 10, you see some humility there finally out of Jacob. I'm not worthy of the least of the mercies, right? In verse 11, deliver me, I pray thee, for I fear him, it says, lest he's going to come and smite me. And verse 12, remember again the promise, please, right? Sand of the sea and all that, and the blessing, I'd like that. I'd like to be alive for it. That would be great. So God, how are you going to work this out for us? Right? And then he sends the presents, the gifts to appease Esau, which again takes us back to our 1 Timothy verse, and you see this tinge of stuff again, right? The tinge of the money. But in 24 through 25, as we wrap this up, where he's wrestling with God there, all night. So Jacob is left alone, and he's wrestling with God there. And morning comes, touches his thigh, boom, now he's got a limp, right? He's got a limp. He gets his name changed. He's alone. He's afraid. He's wrestling. Now he's all broken and crippled. And he's tired because he's been up all night. But it's interesting then that that's the day that he meets Esau, and that's the day that God provides for him. So oftentimes at our weakest point is when we'll see God at his best. Because then there's no credit there that Jacob can take for anything that he did. It's all on God, right? So, and with that, we'll conclude our epic adventure through God's word today. Y'all are dismissed.